Born in Flea Bottom, the poorest area of King's Landing, a young boy named Davos would survive the hardships of early life, finding work as a cabin boy aboard the smuggler ship Cobblecat, serving under Captain Roro Uhoris. Roro was eventually executed by the Night's Watch for selling weapons to the wildlings, but Davos continued to learn the illegal trade, and soon came to captain his own small smuggler ship, becoming an expert at navigating dangerous and difficult waters. Davos then married a woman named Maria, and together they had 7 sons, naming them Dale, Allard, Mathos, Marek, Devon, Stannis, and Stefan. During Robert's rebellion, the castle of Storm's End was besieged by Lord Mace Tyrell and his loyalist Targaryen forces. Additionally, the naval fleet of House Redwyne joined in the siege, blockading Stormbreaker Bay in order to starve out Stannis Baratheon and his rebel forces. And while Stannis refused to surrender, dooming his people to a slow and painful death, they were ultimately saved by Davos, who took it upon himself to maneuver his ship through the blockade, bringing onions and other foodstuffs into the castle. These supplies allowed Storm's End to endure long enough for Eddard Stark to march his rebel soldiers south and break the siege. In order to reward Davos for his contribution to their victory, Stannis knighted the man and granted him prosperous lands on Cape Wrath, even granting him the name Seaworth so he might establish his own noble house. And while Stannis admired Davos and was grateful to him, his sense of justice could not ignore the crimes of his past, and so he also decreed that Davos must lose the tips of his fingers on one hand. Deeming it a fair trade, Davos agreed to the terms on the condition that Stannis enact the punishment himself. When it was over, Davos collected the bones and wore them in a pouch around his neck, claiming they brought him luck, since the removal of those bones brought wealth and prosperity to his family. House Seaworth prospered greatly under Baratheon rule, but after the death of Robert Baratheon, Westeros was once again divided in the War of the Five Kings. And while the vast majority of the Stormlands supported King Renly Baratheon, Ser Davos owed his loyalty to Stannis, and recognized it was in fact the elder Baratheon brother who had the most legitimate claim to the throne. Davos then traveled to Dragonstone to serve in his king's court, but there ran into conflict with Melisandre, a priestess of R'hllor who had converted many on the island to the Red Faith. The Onion Knight, who worshipped the 7 traditional gods of southern Westeros, became concerned with the power of this foreign priestess and did what he could to counteract her influence. With few lords pledging to support King Stannis, Davos recruited a mercenary naval fleet, led by the Lysene pirate Salladhor Saan, to join the invasion forces being raised at Dragonstone. Davos also undertook a mission to persuade the lords of the Stormlands to support Stannis, but those negotiations ultimately failed. Stannis then ordered Davos to sail to Gulltown, the Fingers, the Three Sisters, and White Harbor, bringing letters that proclaimed Joffrey Baratheon and his siblings were the illegitimate children of incest between Queen Cersei Lannister and her brother Ser Jaime, which would make the deceased King Robert's eldest brother Stannis the true heir to the Iron Throne. After the death of Renly Baratheon, most of his support in the Stormlands switched over to Stannis. However, Ser Courtenay Penrose of Storm's End refused to surrender, and so Stannis ordered Davos to sail with Melisandre underneath the castle, where she gave birth to a shadow assassin who killed the stubborn noble. Now prepared for an invasion of King's Landing, Stannis launched his fleet and engaged in the Battle of the Blackwater. Unfortunately, Davos and 4 of his sons were taken out of the fighting early, with many of their ships destroyed by wildfire attack, and the 4 Seaworth children presumed killed in the battle, while their father became stranded on small stone formations known as the Spears of the Merling King. King Stannis would fare no better, unable to capture the capital city, and driven into retreat by an unexpected alliance between his enemies in House Lannister and Tyrell. Stannis returned to Dragonstone with whatever ship survived the battle, and was soon joined by Davos, who was rescued by the mercenary fleet of Salladhor Saan. Convinced Melisandre and her dark magic was to blame for their defeat, Davos planned to assassinate the priestess, but she proved wary of his schemes and had him arrested before he could make the attempt. Unsure how to proceed next, Stannis sent for Davos and asked his counsel regarding the recent defection of Lord Ardrian Celtigar to the Lannister faction. Sir Axel Florent suggested punishing the small folk for their lord's betrayal by massacring his people on Claw Isle. Yet Davos saw no justice in this decision and strongly objected. Recognizing the honesty and wisdom in the Onion Knight's words, Stannis elevated Davos Seaworth, making him Lord of Rainwood, Admiral of the Narrow Sea, and Hand of the King. With his new position and influence, Davos came to represent the traditionalist faction in the Dragonstone court, supported by the Kingsmen, soldiers still loyal to the faith of the Seven, while Melisandre represented the Red Faith faction, supported by the Queensmen, soldiers bound by their faith in R'hllor. Davos also took it upon himself to release Edric Storm, the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, who was being held on Dragonstone, with Melisandre eager to sacrifice him to the Red God and use his king's blood to wake stone dragons. Realizing there was little more to be gained by remaining in the south, Davos suggested Stannis might win support from the people if he were to act like a true king and sail with his fleet to the Wall, joining the Night's Watch in repelling a massive wildling army threatening to invade the south. Once arrived, Davos was once again sent on a mission to White Harbor, this time charged with gaining the support of House Manderly. However, storms destroyed many of the ships sent with him, causing Salladhor Saan to abandon their cause, leaving the Onion Knight on a rowboat while they made their escape to Essos. Though the journey was difficult, Davos eventually made it to White Harbor and presented his case before the White Harbor court. And while the Onion Knight found support from young Willa Manderly, who was eager to seek revenge against the Boltons and Freys for their betrayal of the Starks, her grandfather, Lord Wyman Manderly, insulted Davos and arrested him, sentencing him to execution. The Lannisters had already sent Lord Manderly a message offering the return of Manderly hostages in exchange for the head of Davos Seaworth, and so they appeared to comply, telling the world they killed the man, even mounting his head and hands outside the walls of their city. Yet in truth, House Manderly had executed a lookalike in order to get their relatives back from Lannister control. Still loyal to the Starks, Lord Wyman then cut a secret deal with Ser Davos, offering to free him and pledge the support of his house to Stannis Baratheon in exchange for the safe return of Rickon Stark, who was being held on the island of Skagos. Davos, ever loyal to his king, agreed to the terms, and with all the world believing him dead, he set sail for Skagos, determined to bring back the youngest Stark child and win the support of a powerful house to the faction of King Stannis Baratheon. A special thanks to all those who have contributed to Civilization X. You make these videos possible, and I am eternally grateful for your support. If you would like to help Civilization X and want a say in the future content of this channel, click on the Patreon link in the description box below, and pledge any amount you'd like on a monthly basis. Or if you would prefer to make a single donation, you can use the PayPal link, also in the description below. And please be sure to like and subscribe, and click on the links to see more.